Hi everybody, Jordan Blotcher here, aka the Sports Card Lawyer. And today I'm going to talk to you about utilizing this really great tool, the Sports Card Investor Market Movers Pro, in order to maximize your profitability in the sports card hobby. And today, more specifically, what I wanted to talk to you all about is, trend lines and trying to figure out how to find the most profitable buys so you can really maximize your profit and passive income in the hobby. So one of the things that the sports card investor tool allows you to do is it allows you to look at trend lines for cards over a certain period of time. So for $50 a month, this platform will allow you to see these trend lines and graphs that are really informative and help you figure out which cards are better to buy than other cards at any given time. Because one of the problems that we see in the sports card community is people treat it in a very speculative way. They buy players based off of, who they think is going to do well in any given season, or, who they think is going to have a great game in any given week. And ultimately what that really is it's glorified gambling. And so I'm making this video to try to teach some helpful ways that I think we can take some of those speculative elements out of the sports card investment community and really try to find, great buys where we can maximize our return on investment. And so today, this video is going to be about using trend lines to do it. So first of all, what is a trend line, or how can you think of a trend line? So basically, the trend lines that the Market Movers app generate for you is it shows you, the trend of how the card has been trading over a certain period of time, in this case, 365 days. And what we expect to see when we look at a trend line is that about half of the sales are going to be above the trend line and half of the sales are going to be below the trend line over any given period of time. And so what we generally like to see is a relatively flat trend line. So what is it that is so great about, a flat trend line? Well, the reason we love a flat trend line is because it means that over the course of any given sample size of time, there has not been dramatic fluctuations in the value of the card. It has been relatively stable. In this case, because we're in August right now, 365 days shows us 2 off seasons and an entire season. So that's a pretty big sample size of time. And so we're able to see when we look and we see a relatively flat trend line, it means that we can expect that the price of a card is going to be relatively stable over the course of an off season and a season, and half of, the sale prices are going to be above that trend line and half are going to be below the trend line. And so what we should really be looking for when we're trying to pick a specific card in a specific grade that we want to target as an investment is a card that has sort of a flat trend line, but is trading well below that trend line at the time that we're looking to purchase it. So to show an example of one really great buy and one not so great buy based off of trend lines alone on today's date, which is August 7th, 2022, I pulled up two different graphs using the Market Movers tool. The first of which is a Joe Burrow Optic Holo 2020 PSA 10. And the second card that I've pulled up is a 2017 Patrick Mahomes Optic Holo PSA 10. So it's two of the most desirable players in football, two of the guys that everybody's looking to have in their collection and everybody wants exposure to, and it is the same card, just from different years, different player, but it's the same card. It's the Optic Holo PSA 10. And when we look at the population counts on these two cards, we see that they're very similar. There's 659 PSA 10s for the Mahomes, and there's 796 PSA 10 for the Burrows. And so, people really love this card. They're highly liquid. You can move them at any time. You can trade them. But if we look at these tools, we can see that on today's date, one of them is a much better buy than the other. So I'm going to take away the Patrick Mahomes graph for now, and we're just going to look at the Joe Burrow graph. So what we see, the first thing that we should ask ourselves is whether or not there is a relatively flat trend line, if it's a steep upwards trend line, or if it's a slightly downwards trend line. And we can see that, this graph is slowly creeping up over the course of a year, in large part because of the Joe Burrow Super Bowl rush that, happened in the postseason last year, where, we can see we have one sale here at $1,500, we have another at $1,300, another at $1,300. And so we sort of have that, anomaly push for Burrow that has caused this trend line to move up over the course of a year. But when we arrive at August 2nd, 2022, when we look at the last sale of the card, we see that it last sold at $710. That's a really great price relative to the $1,500 or the $1,300 or the $1,325 that it traded at here. But when we look at the course of an entire year and we look at where the trend line is, the year-long trend line is right around $750, maybe a little bit lower. So the last sale of the card is at $710, and the trend line is at $750. So that means if the card were to arrive at its trend line, and we should remember that all cards will tend to regress towards their mean. Over the course of a year, we expect the card to trade right around where its trend line is, or it should spend a considerable amount of time trading at where its trend line is. Just take a look at this several-month period after the Super Bowl, where there were all of these sales that were right on the current existing trend line. We expect to see that happen at some point over the course of a year. And so when you're thinking about buying a card, you want to buy a card that's trading below the trend line so that when it arrives at its trend line, you can sell it and make money. But here, there's almost no money to be made because the trend line on the card is only $750 to $710. So if we were to do a little bit of math, we would see that 710 is, very close to 750. And if you're selling in Facebook groups, you may need to be willing to sell at 10% below what the card is trading at in order to move the card quickly. And so there's just no money to be made buying the Joe Burrow Optic Holo. But if you sit there and you say, well, what if Joe Burrow has a great year? What if he makes another run at the Super Bowl? What if he wins MVP? What if this $1,500 comp ends up being, where the card is at the end of the year? To that, I say it's absolutely possible that that will be the case. But when you think about buying the card in that way, it is highly speculative. You are gambling on whether Joe Burrow is going to have a great year. And you have no control over whether Joe Burrow has a great year. You have no control over whether he gets injured. You have no control over whether the Bengals go, 4-13 and Joe Burrow has an off year. He re-aggravates his knee or something like that happens. You have absolutely no control over whether that is going to happen. But what you can control is when you enter the market for this Joe Burrow card. And right now is not the time to purchase the Optic Holo PSA 10. Because if Joe Burrow goes on to have an average year and this card trends towards its mean, you will make no money or you will slightly lose money when you buy at 90%, when you sell it at 90% comps. But now let's take a look at the Patrick Mahomes over the course of a year. So what you should immediately notice is, first of all, this trend line is slightly downsloping. It's not extremely negatively downsloping, but it is a very slight downsloping trend line. And the second thing that you should notice is that currently the card is trading well below its trend line. Well below. The last sale for this card is $1,856. The trend line on it is right around $2,900. So right now, if you were to buy this card at $1,856, we expect that at some point in time over the course of a year, it's going to get somewhere near that $2,900 trend line. Now, of course, we can't say for certain because this trend line is downward sloping. And so within the next few months, it could be that that trend line is lower than the 2,900, but the season is about to start. And we know that as soon as the season starts, there's going to be more interest in the cards, and Patrick Mahomes having good games will drive the card up. Now, you might say, "Well, Jordan, you just said not to speculate. Isn't that speculative?" And in some ways, yes, it is speculative. However, we know that when the season starts, cards go up regardless of the performance of the player. It's people get excited, people get hyped, they want to buy the card of their favorite players. That's just a market trend that we see year after year after year. And so if you were to buy the Patrick Mahomes at 1856, and then at some point in time over the course of the year it arrives at 2800 or 2900, that's an opportunity for you to make $1,000 on that card. There's no money to be made on the Joe Burrow that we were looking at earlier, but this Patrick Mahomes is trading so far below its trend line that it should catch your attention and should be something that you think about as being a reasonably good buy. Because when that Mahomes trends towards its mean over the course of an entire year, we expect that it's going to be trading much higher than it's trading at today. And so that's just one way that you can utilize this tool to figure out what card is a good buy at any given time. I would never buy that Joe Burrow, but I would absolutely buy that Mahomes. So this has just been a quick lesson on that, and I look forward to sharing more information and knowledge with you over the course of some more videos.